Good morning, everyone. So your reading teacher, Miss Stewart, has let me know that you all are working on your final projects in class and will be using the internet quite a bit for them. I know that all of you are pretty experienced in using the internet, but there is something very important that we need to talk about when using internet resources for a project, and that is copyright rules and guidelines. These rules and guidelines that we'll talk about are extremely important in school as well as just in your everyday lives. So let's go ahead and get started. So many of you may not know what exactly copyright is. You may have seen the small C with a circle around it on the bottom of some web pages or in some books and didn't really know what that meant. Well, copyright is something that protects the creative work that people make from being stolen or used without the creator of the work knowing. Things that are copyrighted require permission before copying anything, reworking anything, or even just sharing the original works that you haven't made yourself. So something that we need to remember is that following copyright rules is not just a suggestion. It's not something that you should probably pay attention to. It's the law that we follow the rules and the guidelines. So copyright and knowing about copyright is very, very important for us. So you may be asking yourself, what kind of original works or creations does copyright protect? Well, copyright protects poetry, it protects novels or any sort of books that you read, it protects plays, visual arts, which is like drawings, paintings, sculptures, and photographs. It protects music, songs, movies, audio recordings, and really the list just goes on. So for example, if you may have thought that you were just going to be a really good friend and it would be okay to make a copy of your favorite book to give to your friend, that's definitely breaking copyright rules. That book that you're reading is most likely protected by copyright, and you cannot just decide to make a copy and give it to your friend. There are also some things and creations that are not protected by copyright. Some of those are intangible things, which are things that can't be touched and they don't have a physical presence, like ideas or facts. I can't copyright what I'm thinking right now if it's just an idea in my brain. I can't copyright the fact that the sky is blue. That's just a fact. Also, jokes, recipes, and fashion and styles are not protected by copyright. Just because you wore a really cool new outfit doesn't mean that the idea for that outfit is yours and nobody can copy you without your permission. That's not protected by copyright. Something you also may be wondering is when copyright starts and how long it lasts. Something pretty cool is that copyright goes into effect immediately after you start your original work. So if I have an idea for a story in my head and then I start writing that story down on paper, it's considered copyrighted once I take that pencil to the paper. My photographs are copyrighted once I've taken the photo. My music is copyrighted once I've written down the lyrics or created a score. And the original work that has been made will be copyrighted for the duration of the author or creator's lifetime, and then will continue to be in effect 70 years after their death. Okay, so something that we need to think about. A misconception that you may have heard before is that in order for something to be copyrighted, it must have the copyright symbol. If you see that little C over here, a lot of people think that you have to have that copyright symbol. This is incorrect. This is a misconception. Original works do not have to have that copyright symbol, but it is something that creators may want to look into to better protect their work. There's something else called public domain that we need to know about. Some things that are online or that are written or things that you can see are not copyrighted because they have moved into something called the public domain. So what that means is that their copyrights have expired, have been given up, or have been waived, and the works are available freely for public use and cannot be bought or owned privately. They belong to the public, which is us. Some works in the public domain are like classical music, for example, by Bach and Beethoven, which I know that you guys have learned about in your music class, as well as works of art by such as the Mona Lisa, and those are in the public domain because their copyright has expired. There is a website called Creative Commons that allows you to search for photos that are in the public domain if you would like to use that for your final project, and I have that right over here on the screen for us if you want to write that down and use that for your final project. So now, if you're wondering how you can use what you find on the internet, it's pretty simple, and you just need to follow 4 really easy steps. So first, you need to check who owns the work. Find the author, find the creator, find who owns and made that work. Okay? Next, you need to make sure that you get permission to use that work. Whether that means emailing the creator, calling, or even sometimes you have to pay the creator. Okay, so for example, as a librarian, sometimes I use other people's ideas of things that they've done in the library, which is totally okay to use other people's ideas. But I have to pay them for the materials and that lesson plan that I use, and I still can't call it my own. I need to give credit to whoever I bought that from. So we need to get permission to use it. Next, you have to give the credit to the creator once you've used it, which I just mentioned before. I can't just copy their work and say that it's mine. I have to give them credit. For your final project, this means that you'll have to make something like a works cited page that lets Miss Stewart know all of the websites that you may have used and who the authors of those sites are. Finally, all you have to do is use the information that you find responsibly. Some examples of breaking copyright can be, like I said earlier, making copies of an entire book that is protected by copyright. Even if you're just wanting to share it with a friend, you can't make a copy of it. You have to go out and buy another copy so that that author is getting credit. You're also not able to make audio files available for others of a song that is protected. It's against copyright to produce a protected play, or to write a new song that copies the melody of a protected song, or to buy an album and then sell copies of it. Those are all breaking copyright, and they aren't properly giving the author or creator what they deserve. That's not giving respect to the person who created the work. And that is what we're trying to do, is to respect the people who are creating these works. So you may be thinking, it sounds like everything is copyrighted, and what in the world do I do? So, something that can help us steer clear of breaking copyright but still use the resources we find is something called fair use. Fair use can be an exception to copyright. So what is fair use? It is something that allows us to copy copyrighted material for limited and transformative purposes. Limited means we're not using the whole thing, and transformative purposes means that we're not just using it exactly as we see it in the original work. We're changing it in some way to make it our own. So there are 4 factors that we need to consider to decide whether something is fair use or not. First, we need to make sure that the purpose of us using the resource is not to make any money. We're not trying to make a profit. We're not trying to make any money. Or we are using that resource for learning purposes. Okay, we're trying to help other people to learn. Next, we need to check out the nature of the copyrighted work. Is it a fictional work or non-fictional? Is it published or unpublished? These are just things that we have to consider when we are deciding whether we can use it fairly or not. Thirdly, we can only use a small amount of the whole work. The less amount of the work that we are using, the better the chances of our copying of this work being considered fair use. If we're copying the whole thing, that's not fair use. We can only use a small amount in order for it to be considered fair use. Finally, we have to make sure that the use of the work won't have an effect on the sale of the original copyrighted work. We don't want to use an original work in a way that would take away future income or money from the creator. That could really land you in some trouble. So we need to make sure that every time we're using something and we're trying to think whether it's fair use or not, are we looking through these 4 guidelines to make sure that it's fair use. So how is all this information going to help you? Well, now we know that we are able to use a small amount of work that we find online without having to worry about getting in trouble with copyright, as long as we make sure we are thinking about those 4 fair use factors. We also know that whenever we use something from somebody else, we need to add some sort of new meaning, that transformative aspect, to make it our own original work and not just a copy of someone else's work. We need to make sure that we're using the information in a new and different way, and that we are definitely only using their work for non-profit purposes, which means that we're not trying to make any money off of what we made. So even when we follow these guidelines, we always need to give credit to the original creator. So if you're still asking yourself, why should we care? Should I really care? Is there anything that's going to happen? Yes, breaking copyright is a legal problem. Let me tell you, things can get very serious. So possible fines for unknowingly breaking copyright can range from $750 to $30,000 if you break copyright. Okay? If somebody breaks copyright knowingly, like they did it on purpose, fines can be up to $150,000. Sometimes people break copyright knowingly, like they meant to do it, and they try to make money off of what they copied without permission. They can be fined up to $250,000 and can get time in jail. Okay, now these problems are on a much bigger scale than just creating a final project in your 5th grade class, but we do need to know that later down the line, copyright can get very serious. Okay, so I just want you to think about it. How would you feel if you worked extremely hard on something, whether it be a piece of art, a story you wrote, a play you came up with, or whatever, and someone copied it and called it their own? That isn't how we treat people. Okay, copyright really just boils down to treating people and their work with respect. So, you 5th graders have been really amazing listeners today. Thank you so much for learning with me about copyright. I hope you've learned awesome things, and we are going to get on with a really fun activity that I have for all of you today. Thanks, guys.